This is Andy Purewal for Boxing Social in association with Betfred, and I'm delighted to be joined by Adam Smith over Zoom. Adam, first and foremost, how you doing?
Good, thank you. Yeah, what a weekend. So much happening on a Sunday as well in the sort of the aftermath, and a few stories coming out. So it's been busy. Managed to have a small amount of downtime with the kids, but it's pretty hectic times at the moment in the boxing world, and but we like it busy, don't we? And we've got a huge run up till Christmas. So it's fantastic, and it's great that so much is happening in the sport. What's been such a difficult year. Despite obviously the lack of crowds and the fact we missed those atmospheres. The actual boxing's been fantastic, hasn't it? And there's never a dull moment in this sport, and unpredictable tales coming out all the time. So we've got to be on our toes.
Adam, let's obviously get straight into it and reflect on the show over here in the UK first and foremost. Katie Taylor, a brilliant performance from Katie. I remember asking you, and I asked Matt before the fight, did we feel that kind of, because of the extra bit of rest time she was having, is this maybe a sign she was coming towards the end of her career? But she showed no signs of that in the slightest with her performance. But in Gutierrez, just a very, very tough opponent. What did you make of their fight?
Totally agree. It was almost Katie winding back the years, wasn't it? She was so fast and fresh that you sort of felt maybe you're looking at the early start of her professional career. I thought it was a brilliant performance. I really did. I thought she was spellbinding at times. I thought she boxed beautifully. The way she started, tried to sort of overrun Gutierrez, and I think Gutierrez was completely sort of stunned by that beginning. And never really managed to get into it at all. She was, as you said, extraordinarily tough and brave, and obviously could hit a bit. Remember, she was bringing an unbeaten record in, and she was the mandatory challenger for the WBA title. But Katie proved that she was levels above, and I thought it was a fantastic virtual punch perfect performance from Katie Taylor, and it was just brilliant to watch her, wasn't it? It was a glorious performance, and sort of it was just you sort of sat back and really enjoyed it, and it was good at the end in the last couple of rounds that Gutierrez could manage to hear the final bell, because I think there were times in the fight where, certainly in the third round, when she was under huge attack and just held on there, and then she was knocked down, and I know Matt was calling sort of around 6 or 7 for the corner to be having a look, because it was so painful, and she was really outclassed. But she managed to hang in those last couple of rounds. You almost sort of wanted them to stop it, but you almost wanted her to get through, because she was so brave. And I not only did it, obviously we loved the performance from Katie Taylor, and I think off the back of 3 very hard fights, those 20 rounds against Delphine Persoon, and obviously up in Wed against Linda Dartu as well, I think she needed that sort of a performance. And at the end, you could just see her class when she sort of handed some of the belts to Gutierrez and let her have a picture with her. I thought that was absolutely fabulous, and it just goes to show that she's just such a star in and out of the ring. And it was terrific that we were able to open it up as well to all those people that could watch on Facebook and YouTube. The numbers were terrific across the board, and it was brilliant. It was a great showcase, wasn't it? And of course, we had Terry Harper's fabulous display as well, and that was she regained her confidence after having a tough few weeks after the Natasha Jonas draw. She was very hard on herself, and she wanted to go out and make a statement, and she really did. And then Rachel Ball winning as well. It was a great night, wasn't it? Plus we had other fights on the card that I'm sure we'll talk about. So yeah, it was a not just a showcase, it was a really great night of boxing, full stop. Male, female, it was just a cracking sort of show for us, and to show so much talent in the boxing world at the moment, both from the Irish and Katie Taylor, and the British women on the back of Chantel Cameron and Savannah Marshall. And you had 2 really good performances from Rachel Ball and Terry Harper. So look, boxing's in a great place, isn't it?
Certainly is, Adam. It was a brilliant performance, as you mentioned, from Terry Harper. This time out, she mentioned obviously she broke her hand in the fourth round, I believe it was, but she continued to box and she looked to just move as we saw around the ring. Do you feel that she would have adopted that stance if it wasn't for the injury that she suffered?
I mean, it was almost not evident that she was injured. I thought she boxed so well. You know, she took control right at the beginning with that great jab she's got, utilizing her, you know, her skills on the back foot, on the front foot, but at range. And I think that's what Natasha Jonas didn't allow her to do in fight camp. I think, you know, Jonas was brilliant that night, and I think that she put in a performance. And Terry was very hard on herself, you know, and I said to her in the week, look, it wasn't a bad performance from you. And Eddie Hearn was trying to rally her. I said it was a really, really good fight, one of the best fights we've ever had. You know, certainly this year. You know, in women's boxing, it was absolutely brilliant, wasn't it? And as I said, in any boxing, really, it was a really, really good fight. The draw in Matchroom's Garden. And, you know, it was very close. I mean, we felt Natasha Jonas won that fight. But, you know, I think Terry was really hard on herself. And I think that, you know, she needed that confidence. And I think she got out. And a bit like Savannah Marshall, who also, you know, sometimes in the past has struggled, you know, mentally with, you know, the belief in herself. And I think when she found against Hannah Rankin in those first couple of rounds that you know, it was really working. She was into a groove. I think then you could just feel the sort of confidence flowing. And I think the same thing happened with Terry Harper. I think once she had a couple of really good rounds in the bank, and Steffi was giving a huge encouragement, wasn't she? You know, wasn't he at the, you know, in between rounds, and, you know, you can hear him sort of, you know, shouting all the way through. And I think that really helped her. So I think she put in a fantastic display. Thanos was tough and you know, kept coming at her, and she had her, you know, her successes as well, but she was a little bit slow and she couldn't really fathom Terry's style out. And, you know, I think, yes, with the injury she told us about afterwards, I think, as I said, it wasn't that evident because she was boxing so well and most of it was coming off her left hand anyway. And then she got the finish with, you know, hurt her with a body shot and followed up. That's absolutely terrific. And, you know, with the injury as well, you've got to say that was a standout performance, one of the best of her career. But she went back to boxing like she did against Eva Volstrom. You know, she went back to doing what she does best. And, you know, Thanos was unbeaten. She was really physically fit and strong and so determined to take those titles back to, or that title, the WBC and the IBO, back to Scandinavia. But Terry was too good, and you know, it was a really good performance. I mean, I think if Katie Taylor was phenomenal, then Terry Harper was brilliant and was a fabulous display from her, from, you know, very, very young girl still, from young lady, 24 from Dennerby. She's got such a future in front of her. There's huge unifications. There's that rematch with Natasha Jonas, who, of course, it was great to have her with us as part of our team, and it was brilliant to get her insight. And I know she was annoyed at the end, Tasha, when Eddie mentioned all the other champions and sort of not her against Terry Harper. But I think Natasha can fight Katie Taylor. I think that's a really big fight. You know, while Natasha's hot off the back of that great performance in the summer, you know, and Katie is maybe waiting for Cyborg or Serrano. I think that's a fight that can be made. And of course, you know, we saw them go at it in the Olympics in front of a great crowd, and that'll be nice when crowds are back to have that fight in Britain. But I wonder if, you know, Katie can still fight in Ireland or can fight in on the Eastern Seaboard again, maybe, you know, early in spring next year. But there's so many options, aren't there, for Katie? I think what we do know is that anyone that thought that she was, you know, maybe, you know, sort of closing down on her career, 3 or 4 fights left or something. I mean, it looked like she could go on for another 3 or 4 years on that performance. She's 34, but remember, she's only been a pro for 4 years. And, you know, to sort of, I know that Gutierrez wasn't expected to beat her, and obviously she was a hot favourite, Katie, but it was the manner of victory. And I just think people were just, whoa, they'd forgotten quite how fast she is. And, you know, it was electric to watch, wasn't it? And I'm sure she can go on and on as long as she wants to keep challenging herself and she can keep healthy. But, you know, and then she got on the plane straight back to America, and there won't be much downtime for Katie. She wants the next challenge. And that's why we absolutely love her, respect her. And, you know, we've given her criticism, you know, and the first Bassoon fight, many of us thought Bassoon got the better of her just about in the Garden. And yes, she won the rematch, but it was close. And, you know, a lot of people thought Bassoon did really well in that fight as well. But, you know, credit where credit's due. She is an absolute superstar. And she proved it again on Saturday night, why she's so good. And also, it's not just what she does in the ring, which is breathtaking, through amateur and pro. And I think she is a one-off. And I think we just got to enjoy her while she's here, because I don't think there'll be another Katie Taylor. And I just think she's inspired so many of the women, of the men as well. Everyone speaks of her in such such high esteem. I don't know. Ricky Hatton was a much loved fighter, Frank Bruno, and I can't remember a fighter that is universally as loved as Katie Taylor. No one has got, and no one can have a bad word about her, because she's so down to earth and such an inspirational figure out of the ring, and she's so great to watch. Even in their close fights, she'll take any challenge. But it was so one-sided on Saturday, and that's her mandatory challenger. So whether Matt thinks she's the standout, whether Clarissa Shields will agree with that, that's debatable. But you've got Savannah Marshall hunting Clarissa Shields down, so it's a fantastic time for the women. It's a fantastic time for boxing that we're getting so many great fights. And I think on that performance, Katie can go on, and it's just great to have her in the sport, isn't it?
Certainly is, Adam. Touch on the final world title fight between Rachel Ball and Guanini. Rachel Ball is just somebody who's taken lockdown and the opportunities with both hands, and again another very good performance. Scorecards may be slightly wider than what most had them, certainly watching the show. What were your thoughts on their fight there?
Yeah. Well, listen, a really good performance, and Guanini gave everything she could. I mean, listen, it was a tough week. It was a turbulent week, and it was just good to get both ladies into the ring, with all the weight issues and all that. And it can't have been easy for either of them. But what we did get was Guanini put in a good shift, but didn't win it. Rachel was good. I thought it was a quiet start, but I thought she boxed well at the beginning and certainly came on in the latter rounds. There was a few sort of, I think 3, 4, 5 that Guanini really came into it and gave her trouble. But remember, Guanini was a world champion as well, albeit at a different weight. I think it's a feel-good story, isn't it, for Rachel Ball? She's a breath of fresh air. She was great around the bubble. She's an intelligent woman. She's tried so hard to get to something like this sort of platform, and she's gone through kickboxing, she's going through marathon runners, and remember her day job as a social care worker is just the best of anything. That's something you salute her for anyway, never mind the boxing. But she just is so dedicated, and she really wants to bring the best out of herself. And as I said, she's a breath of fresh air. It's fantastic to see. And there's so many good fights out there for her. The likes of Shannon Courtney and, in time, Amy Timlin and Ellie Scottney and Ramla Ali. There's loads of them out there, and Carla Skelly, loads of good fighters. And I just think that it's a terrific story, the Rachel Ball story. And that's as much in a way as an inspiration as Katie or Terry or any of the others, because she's done it the hard way. She's done it almost the old-fashioned way, of sort of coming through and proving herself on the smaller shows. And what a year she's had in 2020. She's done so much great social care work, which is so important at a time like this, where the country's going through such turmoil. But to actually take her opportunity on Fight Camp and have that great fight with Shannon Courtney, and then we were trying to get Natasha Jonas to fight on Saturday. That didn't work out, so Rachel steps in, and then she doesn't get her full world title. It's an interim belt. She doesn't know whether she's on or off, and then she can go out, keep herself composed, and even kept herself composed in the post-fight interview. Didn't burst into tears like she did at Fight Camp, but we could have excused her for that, because she's great, isn't she? And I love the Rachel Ball story, and I can't wait to see her back in the ring.
Just moving away from Rachel Ball and to touch on a couple more fights. Jack Cullen, John Doherty was a brilliant fight. That's arguably probably the best that we've seen of Jack on the Sky show since he's obviously been boxing on them. What did you make of their matchup?
Yeah, really good fight, wasn't it? Very entertaining from start to finish. John Doherty had sort of, promised everybody that he was going to smash Jack to pieces. And, and he tried to at the beginning. He tried to sort of start fast, and we know about his knockout power at the beginning. But also, the fighting career is a long career, and, you need education. And I think he got, a little bit of a lesson on Saturday night, and not a lesson to say, hey, you can't speak like that. That's what gets him up, and that's what, that's what he believed. Nothing wrong with that. He was in great shape. He's got a great trainer in Tony Sims. But I think what he learned was that, with Jack Cullen, despite the fact he'd had a couple of performances which, made me think, okay, is he quite what we thought he might be? Middleweight with the Felix Cash night. And then I thought Zach Chelly beat him at Fight Camp, even up at super middle. And you just wondered whether, Jack would at quite a young age would actually become a sort of bit of a gatekeeper rather than a prospect like we thought he was. But, he proved on Saturday night how good he is. And the fact that what I really liked about Jack Cullen was his defense. you know, I spoke to him actually on the morning of the fight. I wished him well, and I sort of felt, you know, there he was with, you know, the Jennings stable. He's got a great corner himself, and you know, they helped sort of guide him through. But I just thought he took a lot on his shoulders. It was a risky fight for him. He was going to fight Jamie Cox. He took this young, sort of unbeaten, you know, pretty cocky, confident Scottish super middleweight who a lot of people think is, you know, is going to go far in the sport. And okay, there's nothing wrong with the defeat early doors. Matt Macklin had it. You know, he was sitting next to me on Saturday night against Andrew Facey. You know, they can come through that. Johnny Nelson lost his first 3. It's great that they both took the opportunity for this. But let's give Jack Cullen a lot of credit for it. You know, he was under real pressure that night because, you know, another loss or another bad performance, and then, you know, you start to think, well, where would his career go? But, you know, so he really needed that, and he took his chance, and he showed how he's tucked up. He showed his class. He showed what he learned, and after a bit of a torrid start, as we expected, you know, he dusts himself down, doesn't he? But normally he's hit a lot more than that, Jack, and I thought he boxed really well. Craig Doherty came back at him at times. He stuck with it. There was times where the gumshoe was coming out, and you thought, is he gonna maybe, you know, pull out, or is he gonna fall apart? But to be fair to him, he stuck with it as well. So I think he learned a great deal, Doherty, in it, and he can come on stronger for that. As for Jack, great win for him, and you know, his career is back on the sort of playing field that he would want it, and now he's got big fights to look forward to, and I think he's much better suited at super middleweight, having dragged himself down to middle. He looks like he's grown into the weight, and I think, you know, he'll go on from here and from strength to strength. But it was a really good match and a really good fight for the card.
Another good fight we saw, another good performance we saw was from Cash Farouk. Again, just he's finally made his matchroom debut, something that's been long awaited. A lot of talk after that about the potential Lee McGregor rematch. Do you see that as being, if not the most logical, then certainly one of the next fights for Cash?
Well, it was a really good fight with Lee the first time round, and I think Lee was going to fight for the European title, and that fell through with obviously COVID issues. But I'd love to see that fight. I was really impressed with Cash Farouk. I mean, we waited a long time for the matchroom debut. That couldn't have been easy for him. So different fighters take it in different ways. You know, he was meant to be on, I think, in Peterborough then a couple of weeks ago on the USAC Chisora card. So, you know, he was annoyed about that. He wanted that big platform. So, and then another change in opponent, and a tough guy and a Mexican, you know, champion who come obviously to win. You know, we could see that, but I really like Farouk. I liked his ring walk. I mean, coming out to Long Tall Sally by Little Richard, an old classic, you know, and then he just delivered a classic sort of old-fashioned performance as well. And Matt said to me afterwards, I didn't commentate on that, but Matt said to me afterwards, you know, if you'd seen that on a Vegas card, people will be absolutely raving about him as this real new talent. I mean, he boxes in a wonderful rhythm, doesn't he? You know, it's sort of non-stop. He gets in the pocket. He throws a very, very big variety of punches. You know, head and body, side to side. I really like watching him. You know, the one thing is you wonder about the power and how much he's got on that front. That may be because, you know, obviously Mexicans and Abias turn young, and you know they're strong and tough, and they can take a lot. Obviously, we know that about their chins and their resilience generally. But you know, I think that, you know, his power, if there is a he can work on that. If there is a little bit more than maybe we saw on Saturday, he'd almost be the full package, wouldn't he? You know, if you think if he could hit really hard, I mean, you think he's a world champion in weighting, you know, almost no question. But listen, I would love to watch him as he goes through the levels. I think the McGregor fight's a really good fight. I think he'll certainly be fighting for world titles down the line with performances like that. I mean, Matt and I, both of us, were just extremely, we're sort of not blown away. I think he'd have been blown away if he would have knocked him out in 6-7 rounds, done a number, and then sort of finished it in real style. But there were times where you sort of thought, you know, he could have got that stoppage and didn't. So that only question mark does raise about the power. But as I said, teak tough Mexican, and you can't criticize Cash Farouk in any way for that performance. I thought it was terrific to watch. I think everyone on social media was raving about him. I think he's he's a real talent, and very unaffected as well. Very down to earth, quiet guy. Lets his fists do the talking, and I'm sure you'd agree, Andy. We want to see a lot more of him.
100%, Adam, we certainly do. Just moving forward, just want to touch on a couple of fights of this weekend show before moving on to a few other matters. Conor Benn returns to the ring against Formella. What are you expecting to see from Conor this coming weekend?
Yeah, look, I'm really excited about Conor Benn coming back. I mean, you can't not be excited about Conor. He's obviously he's had the attention because of his dad, but he's very much carved out his own career. You know, he's learned a great deal. He had a short amateur career, and you know, under Tony Sims and the team, he's learned. He's become his own man, hasn't he? You know, he's not sort of mollycoddled by his dad. He's not, you know, overlooked and pushed by his dad. Nigel very much keeps himself as a support figure, which is fantastic, as somebody that, you know, he can call for advice, but somebody that keeps himself very much away from it, and I like that. And Conor's, you know, taken the bull by the horns. He's gone. He's obviously a great personality. He speaks well. He looks good. And he fights fun as well, doesn't he? He's exciting to watch. But you know, he's sort of, you know, concentrating on his boxing skills as well. I think his performances have improved over the last 3 or 4 fights, and I'm really looking forward to him being in with a, you know, for an excellent test this Saturday night. Back-to-back fight nights for us. You know, Conor Benn leading the way, and you know, we know he does big numbers on digital. People are interested in Conor. Obviously, the name comes with him, but I think, as I said, in his own right, he's proving a a very exciting force in the welterweight division. And you know, he's got another assignment to get through on Saturday night, and a big ask, and then, you know, we can see him maybe in with the likes of, you know, I don't know, your Josh Kellys and really interesting fights down the line. And I think this division, as we know, worldwide is very, very explosive, very, very competitive. So, you know, obviously Eddie will want to take his time with Conor, but I think, you know, so far so good. And as I said, I'd love to be around. Can't wait to be in the bubble with Conor, because, you know, he's great to be a part of his story. And yeah, it's fantastic. But let's have a look and see how he does on Saturday night. Great card as well. Obviously, we've got, you know, Alan Babbage in a really interesting fight with Tom Little. I'm sure that will be fun in the bubble too, and Fabio Wardley as well. And you know, just obviously we learn about Dave Allen in the last 24 hours as well. So you know, we wish Dave well, and he's obviously made a decision which he feels is sensible, and I back him 100% for that. You know, we spent a lot of time in the bubble a couple of weeks ago, and he didn't get his fight that week, but he entertained us all. And you know, I'm sure people will want to see him on the boxing circuit still, and you know, maybe he could become a good trainer or something like that. But obviously, he had problems in sparring, and you know, he's thought about it. And I think that, you know, you have to respect a fighter for that says, look, you know, if he's getting hurt in sparring, or he doesn't feel it's right for him, then absolutely doesn't want to be hit anymore, then absolutely you make the right call. And I think we all wish Dave well, and we hope he's still very much around the scene, because he's such a great character.
Just to touch on that Babbage Little fight, Adam, it's going to be an interesting matchup, because both of them, when I've spoken to them, have said that they're promising to kind of stand and trade, and effectively, in Tom Little's word, it will be like a Gatty Ward type fight. Is that what you're expecting?
Andy, I don't think we expect anything else, do we? I think that's why the match has been made. I mean, he looks in great shape, Little, and I'm sure he thrives on occasions like this. You know, sort of, he's lost some, but you know, he goes in and gives it his all. He's another great character in the sport. And as for the Savage, you know, the Savage knows one way, and you know, he's going to try and destroy everyone in front of him. But yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it? You know, whether it's 3 rounds, 6 rounds, however long it goes, it's going to be absolutely terrific action, and that's what we all want to see with Babbage. And Little will bring the heat, and let's see if Babbage can go.
And obviously, you mentioned Dave Allen there. Just with regards to kind of the footage and what Dave said since, a surprise, was it a surprise at all? And obviously, with the footage, what did you make of the sparring with Alexander Usyk?
Yeah, look, I mean, I as I said, I spent a lot of time with Dave Allen in the bubble a couple of weeks ago, and you know, he wanted to fight then. He was disappointed not to get on. He wanted to get out very quickly again. But you know, obviously, he's sat down. I think he sat down with his sister, didn't he? And look, you know, we've been worried about Dave before, haven't we? You know, in various ways. And I think that, you know, we remember the fight with David Price. No one wants to see fighters go on too long or get hurt. You know, he's been a sparring partner for a long time. He's had a bit of a golden ride, hasn't he, as well? And he's had some, you know, some great nights. You know, the one against Lucas Brown, and you know, headline bills. And, you know, I think he's done more than he ever thought he would do in the sport. And look, the most important thing, as we know from boxing, is the health and safety of fighters. You know, at a time like this, with COVID going on, and everybody's sort of worried about that. You know, it's hard enough in the ring for the fighters, for these gladiators, but everything going on around as well. And I think lockdown has you know, the ways that people have sort of dealt with this year has got, you know, got a lot of people thinking about, you know, how they want to continue their lives, how they want to change things. We've all had to adapt in various ways in all of our households. And I think that for Dave, you know, he's obviously made the decision that's right for him, and I'm behind him 100%. You know, I spoke to Eddie about it yesterday, and you know, you can't, if a fighter feels like that, that's the worst thing we want is fighters to go on too long and, you know, risk that sort of, you know, their legacies, or risk their careers, risk their health, risk their livelihoods. It's far more important things outside of boxing, you know, family life, and you know, he's got his whole life ahead of him. So, but I'd like to see Dave stay in the sport, because he's as I said, he's such a character. He makes you laugh, but he's really knowledgeable. I sat with him for an hour or two a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about, you know, the days of Naz, the days of, you mentioned Gassi Ward, and you know, he loves sort of looking back on fights, and you know, then he played in the darts tournament, and I mean, I tell you, his maths as he counts down the dart is incredible. I mean, he's a man of many talents, Dave Allen. You know, so we've seen him fight. We've obviously, you know, he's a bit of a cult figure, and you know, I totally respect him, and I'd love to see him sort of, as I say, still around the scene, and you know, maybe he can get some work on you know, on the safer side, or as I say, maybe train fighters, or certainly I'd love to see him sort of, you know, become a motivator, or you know, work with the young, because I think he'd be fantastic at that. I think he's been through a lot, and he's still fairly young himself, and I think he can give a lot back, Dave Allen. And you know, as I said, I will support him all the way, because he's given us great value. But I think it's a sensible decision. That's how he feels, and you know, it's a you know, it's a tough world, isn't it? The heavyweight world, and you know, maybe he just felt, look, this enough's enough.
Moving forwards, Adam, there was a fight after during the night on Saturday between Britain Brook and a pound-for-pound star in Terence Crawford. Up until the point of Terence's stoppage, what did you make of Cal whilst he was in there?
Well, it was a really late night. I've got to be honest. I was struggling to sort of keep my eyes open. It was, you know, because of the problems with the fight before, and the amount of time the commission took. And I mean, what a shambles all that was, I thought. You know, Maloney, and you know, could we see much of a head clash? I mean, it, you know, seemed like jabs and all that. I mean, it was a very strange one, and they were taking a long time. And I've got a huge respect for Bob Bennett and Robert Byrd, and you know, the whole commission. But it was a very odd one. It was. I don't know if you saw, but Helen Mirren, actually, she's
Yeah,
a big fight fan. Helen Mirren, did you see that?
yeah.
You know, even she was sort of, you know, deplored by what had happened. And anyway, the delay on that, and I was so up for the fight and all that. We followed Kel for such a long time, and Terence Crawford, what a great fighter he is. And remember when he came over and fought Ricky Burns, who'd have thought that he'd go on and dominate like he has, and then he's been knocking everybody out, stopping them. He's got that real sort of spike now to add to that, you know, possible pound for pound mantle. And anyway, and I've got to say, sort of, you know, as the first round was just, I had to sort of really hit myself and keep going, because you're closing in on 6 o'clock, aren't you? But no, but Kel boxed well in the first, you know, 2 or 3 rounds. I thought he was a little bit, he said it afterwards actually, that he didn't really let his shots go, and didn't quite get into the rhythm. But he, you know, maybe he was a little bit sort of on edge because of the Crawford power and because of the Crawford name and all that. So I'm not sure he might have, you know, won a couple of those first rounds, but I don't think he stamped his authority, and I think that was always going to be a problem. But look, you know, he got caught, you know, and that was it. And to see him afterwards mouth what happened was you know, was a shame, wasn't it? It was a startling sort of reality about, you know, what had happened. And you know, it's really tough when you get caught like that. And you know, obviously it was a crushing, you know, power defeat for Cal. It was a great knockout win for Terence Crawford, and you know, he'll go on, and we want to see him fight obviously Errol Spence and all the other great challenges, Pacquiao, all the great challenges that are ahead. And you know, it's a shame for Kel, but you know, he came up against the better guys. He said afterwards, it was very brave of him to give the interview straight afterwards. I thought that was good of him. I thought it was always going to be a daunting task to go there. He seemed in great shape. He seemed mentally and physically so confident. But you know, he's been through a lot over the years. You know, you know, he's gone down, and he had to go back down from that middleweight challenge to his natural weight, but it was probably, you know, a grind down to get down for Errol Spence, and he had to do it again for this. And you know, it's a shame. And you know, you're probably going to ask me, should he retire now? That's up to him. It's, you know, he's done all you know, he's probably has been asked of him, or that he wants to. He's won a world title. He's been in some fantastic fights. He's probably not fulfilled all that early potential in the Brendan Ingle camp. I thought that maybe he'd go on to be a sort of 2-weight champion in the early days, and you know, maybe, you know, he took that big leap up to fight Golovkin, and you know, he got well paid and he gave it a real go. But then the Spence fight, he probably took a lot out of him. He had some troubles outside the ring. He's done well to come back and get his life, you know, back in order and fight really well. And he's given us, you know, it's always great being part of a Kell-Brook fight. And look, I don't know what the options are. It's either retirement, or maybe it's that long awaited Amir Khan fight. But Amir seems to be, you know, sort of half out of sort of the ring anyway, and dealing with sort of the Middle East, and you know, helping the WBC out. And I don't know whether either of them would fancy that or get up for it again, or whether, you know, we would do that. I mean, we've always wanted the match, so I'm sure, you know, we'd still, you know, we still welcome a match like that between the two of them. But again, like we talked about Dave Allen, do we want them to go on too long if they've got other things in their lives? And Kell's made money, Amir's made money. So look, it's up to them. We're not here to tell fighters to retire or whatever. It's up to Kell, and I'm sure he'll sit down with his close-knit family and talk to Terry and just be advised by the people around him, and they'll say, look, whether it's right now to call it a day, or whether, you know, maybe he'll have one last hurrah, and possibly that will be, you know, that Amir Khan fight. But yeah, you don't want to see him go on too much longer, because I think he's achieved so much and he's made money, and that was a good payday he got over in Vegas. And yeah, it's no disgrace, is it, to lose to the likes of Errol Spence, Gennady Golovkin and Terence Crawford, you know, three of the greatest fighters of this generation. So what we all want to do, and I think what Kell was asked, and I think a little bit unfairly afterwards, was, you know, he was sitting there in the realms of a bad defeat, and you know, he was being pushed on whether he thought Errol Spence was better than Terence Crawford. I think a little harsh to sort of, you know, push him there and then. You know, that's something that he's got to look back at and think. And I think he was so shocked and didn't really know what happened to him in the ring afterwards that I think maybe that's a question best waited for a later day. But I think, you know, he went longer with Errol Spence in a ring, but you know, Crawford's power, and listen, styles make fights, as he rightly said. And I think we all want to see that Spence-Crawford fight. You know, Spence is back against Danny Garcia in a couple of weeks, and let's see him get that one out of the way. And it's a tough fight, and if Spence can come through, then obviously that's the fight that the world wants to see, isn't it? Crawford and Spence. And you know, Bob Arum was very adamant afterwards about who he thought would win that. But I think it's a pick 'em fight. I think they're both such talented fighters, and you know, that will be a fantastic matchup if that can be made. You know, Errol Spence against Mikey Garcia proved his absolute class, and Crawford has just been, you know, with Vasyl Lomachenko sort of, you know, losing to Lopez, maybe Crawford is now the pound for pound best. But you know, there'll be much debate about all of that with Canelo as well. Canelo possibly fighting Callum Smith, and so much ahead. Tyson Fury, you know, pulling out of the December the 5th, you know, muted comeback. So much is happening in boxing. It's just all these balls in the air, and it's so difficult at this time with a lot, you know, a lot based on crowds and based on finances. And you know, we'll just have to wait. In 2021, we'll hopefully get a few more of these blockbuster fights. But I think the back end of 2020 has given us so much to talk about, hasn't it? And that's great.
Just to touch on Canelo Smith there, Adam, what do you make of, or what do you know about kind of that situation? Because there certainly seems to be a lot of noise that a deal seems to be close to being agreed.
Yeah, I know what you know. I know that's that it's a likely fight. I hope it happens. You know, Billy Joe Saunders is back in a couple of weeks on our show, and you know, he's got a good fight against Martin Murray, and then obviously he's in the mix. You know, he missed out on that, but to be honest, you know, Callum Smith's been waiting his turn, hasn't he? And look, we'd love to see Callum Smith in there with Canelo. You know, there's I mean, Tony Bellew, Natasha Jonas, all the sort of Liverpool voices around me last week were saying, you know, Callum's going to pull this off. You know, people think he's an underdog, rightly so, against Canelo, but you know, he's big and he's strong, and he's, you know, listen, he's unbeaten. He's a fantastic fighter in his own right. Won the World Super Series, and I think he deserves it. I really hope that fight is made for the back end of December, and we'll all be glued to it. Yes, you've got to see Canelo as a pre-fight favourite, because he's, you know, he's a superstar and he's so good. And you know, watching him up close, you know, when he fought Danny Jacobs, you know, Jacobs is a great fighter, and you know, he was just that little bit better. And you know, Callum will have it all to do out there, but you know, he's got his brother right by him. He's shared a ring with Canelo as a big help, and you know, I think Liam would be honest and say Callum's got a much better chance than he had. So yeah, look, it's a great fight if they can make it happen for December 18th, 19th, whatever. If you can get Campbell and Garcia on the card as well, I mean, that's two Brits, and if they pull them off against Garcia and Canelo Alvarez, what a Christmas for British boxing. Absolutely fantastic, and I can't wait to see Callum in that. So yeah, I've got my fingers crossed he gets the fight.
Just a couple more quick ones from me, Adam. We've seen Floyd Mayweather announce that he'll be looking to return to the ring in February over in Tokyo. What's kind of your thoughts on Floyd once again dipping his toe back into the boxing ring?
I mean, it's another thing, isn't it? These rumors, the speculation, these announcements they're coming thick and fast, aren't they? You can't keep up with everything. I mean, Floyd, is it going to be an exhibition? Is it, is there more to it than meets the eye? You just never know with him, with what he says. I do know what I said, and I said it on Saturday night in commentary when I was talking about Katie Taylor's dedication and the fact that whatever talent you've got, if you don't work incredibly hard, it might, like Joe Calzaghe did, for example, it might just not, happen for you. And I think that Floyd Mayweather, for me, the greatest fighter of our generation, the greatest to lace them up since Sugar Ray Leonard. And he was brilliant in a ring, but he was also brilliant in the gym. And he was so dedicated, going off with his mates to nightclubs, but taking his trainers and running back. And, he was never out of shape, was he? I mean, I just love Floyd Mayweather. And of course, a bit like Mike Tyson, a fight that, we're all going to go like that with Roy Jones. And it's really just, it's one of those that you wish sort of hadn't been made. But, with Mike Tyson, you remember back on what a great fighter he was. And even with Mayweather now, you're thinking back to what a great fighter he was. And I just don't really want to see them go on. But, there's always the money. There's always the possibility. There's the fame. They miss it, don't they? They miss that sort of, I don't know, the nights under the lights. And, we're not here to tell fighters what to do and not to do. We're just here to sort of assess it and say what we think. And, for me, Mike Tyson losing to Danny Williams, Kevin McBride, and those guys at the end of his career, and however good he looks on a sort of punch bag and a speedball, the legs are not going to be the same. And okay, he's not fighting a young fighter, he's fighting Roy Jones, but Roy Jones has gone on too long. We were talking around the bubble this week of Roy Jones, if he'd, Sefi Bull and I said, if he'd retired after the John Ruiz fight and as the heavyweight champion as well, and he just would have been remembered as one of the probably greatest 4 or 5 fighters of all time. But, he went on and then came into defeats and, so it's a difficult one, isn't it, to assess, and you don't really know how to look at that. And as far as Floyd goes, well, obviously Floyd is not long retired or not long out of the ring. Whether retirement's what he's done after the Conor McGregor fight, and he had that exhibition, didn't he? And I don't know. It's let's wait and see. But for me, I like to remember Floyd as what he was, which is the greatest fighter to lace them up since Sugar Ray, in my opinion.
Final thing, Adam, we've seen it kind of rumbling on now. Tyson Fury won't be fighting on December 5th. He said he won't back until next year. A lot of that behind the scenes, don't know what's going on, but we're obviously waiting for kind of an official announcement as to what's happening with Deontay Wilder. What do you actually make of this entire situation, Adam?
Well, I mean, Shelley Finkel told me a long time ago that Deontay Wilder would fight Tyson Fury this year, come what may. That is the next fight. Frank Warren then said, look, if we can't get that out for reason of crowds and the issues of COVID, I want to see Tyson Fury fight in the UK before Christmas. So obviously that was the plan. But now they've gone to mediation. Now it's become, a legal matter. There's issues. You saw Frank interviewed on Friday night. We all watched the BT show together in the bubble. It's great fun to all sit there and watch it together, a bit of boxing before the night before. And you saw Frank interviewed, and he really didn't have any answers. And he said, look, it will, we'll make an announcement this week. So I can only imagine that there's, because of the mediation, they need to postpone Tyson Fury's comeback here because they need to see whether Deontay Wilder will be the next fight. So I guess I don't know the contracts. I don't know the situation. I talked to Shelley. I talked occasionally to Deontay, to Frank, to Tyson. It's a shame that Tyson Fury can't get back in a ring. It's a shame that Fury Wilder hasn't happened, but we know the state of the world, and we know the fact that crowds just can't come back, or certainly not many can come back, and they need the big crowd for the gate. So I don't know. Is that going to put the Joshua Fury possibilities back? Are we going to have Fury Wilder in the spring when we can have a crowd? Does that mean Joshua, should he beat Pulev, which is a tough fight anyway, will fight Alexander Usyk first? All of this is in the melting pot. I think what we do know now is that we wish Tyson Fury and the guys a happy Christmas. It's obvious he's not going to fight to 2021, but we all now systems go towards two great heavyweight fights that have been made, Joe Joyce and Daniel Dubois, which we can't wait for on the 28th. And then the big one, Sky Sports box office, December the 12th, AJ against Kubrat Pulev, only ever lost once to Vladimir Klitschko. Really tough fighter, really underrated, really good, dangerous opponent. And now it's all up to Anthony Joshua to retain his titles and smooth his way into 2021. And we'll just see where the politics take us. We know that Alexander Usyk fight is there. He's the mandatory with the WBO. And we know that AJ and Fury want to fight each other. So we have to wait to see what happens, how this thing develops, and we concentrate on what we're doing, which is we've got Anthony Joshua back in a ring in a few weeks' time, and we cannot wait, Andy.
Adam, we'll leave it there now, and we'll leave you to enjoy the rest of your day. I appreciate you giving up some time as always, and I'm sure I'll catch up with you soon on the back of the Ben Formella card. Thank you for speaking to Boxing Social.
Pleasure as always, Andy.